What if I told you that the world's richest tech visionary found himself completely powerless in the middle of nowhere? Elon Musk, master of electric vehicles and space travel, stranded on a desolate Texas highway when his experimental Tesla prototype suddenly died. No phone signal, no backup systems, nothing but miles of scorching desert in every direction. The billionaire who disrupts industries with a tweet was about to face a reality check from an old-school mechanic who hadn't changed his ways since 1968. A man who believed computers had no place in cars. As sweat soaked through his expensive suit, Musk was forced to walk a mile in blistering heat toward the only sign of civilization, a rundown gas station that represented everything his vision aimed to replace. What happens when innovation meets tradition head-on? How does a tech titan react when his futuristic creation needs fixing by the very past he's trying to make obsolete? And what surprising lesson will forever change how Elon sees his own mission? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Tesla Roadster 3.0 hummed quietly as Elon Musk guided it through the desolate stretch of West Texas highway. The landscape around him was a testament to nature's indifference. Vast, sun-scorched plains interrupted only by the occasional jutting rock formation, as if the earth itself had tried and failed to reach the cloudless blue sky. Elon had chosen to drive this route alone deliberately. After 3 consecutive product launches and a week of board meetings, he craved solitude. The prototype beneath him represented the culmination of years of engineering. A fully autonomous vehicle with an experimental AI system that, in theory, could navigate any terrain without human intervention. That was the theory, anyway. The first sign of trouble came with a slight stutter in the engine. Elon's hands instinctively gripped the wheel tighter, his eyes darting to the dashboard display. The numbers flickered once, twice, then the screen went black. "System failure detected," announced a calm, feminine voice that belied the severity of the situation. "Initiating emergency protocol alpha." But nothing happened. No reboot. No backup system engaging. Complete silence. The car rolled to a stop, in the middle of the empty highway, as dead as the desert surrounding it. "Initiate manual override," Elon commanded, his voice still measured despite the first flickers of concern. When nothing happened, he tried again with more authority. "Override system. Authorization, Musk 7291. Still nothing. Elon reached for his phone, already calculating which engineer to call, which diagnostic to run remotely. No signal. He tried the car's satellite communication system. Dead. The experimental vehicle, worth more than most people's lifetime earnings, sat useless beneath the punishing Texas sun. For 20 minutes, Elon worked methodically through every possible solution. He checked fuses, attempted manual reboots, even tried to access the car's underlying code through the emergency terminal. With each failure, the reality of his situation became clearer. He was stranded. A bead of sweat traced its way down his temple as he stepped out of the vehicle, the heat immediately enveloping him. How many times had he assured investors, the public, and himself that his systems were foolproof, that the future of transportation was in autonomous connected vehicles? Now here he stood, arguably one of the most technologically connected men on the planet, completely disconnected. He scanned the horizon, squinting against the glare. In the distance, perhaps a mile down the road, something broke the flatness of the landscape. A small structure with what looked like gas pumps outside, an old-fashioned gas station. Elon almost laughed at the irony. With no other options, he locked the Tesla, though who would steal it out here remained a mystery, and began walking. The sun beat down mercilessly. His lightweight suit jacket, perfect for air-conditioned boardrooms, quickly became unbearable in the Texas heat. He removed it, loosened his tie, and continued forward, the polished leather of his handmade Italian shoes gathering dust with each step. By the time he reached the gas station, his face was flushed, his white shirt clinging to his back. The building itself looked like a relic from another time, faded red paint peeling from wooden siding, an ancient Coca-Cola sign swinging slightly in what little breeze existed. The sign above the entrance read, "Doyle's Gas and Repair," in chipped block letters. Beneath it in smaller font, "Serving Texas since 1968. Elon pushed open the door, a bell jingling weakly to announce his entrance. The interior was dim after the harsh sunlight, and it took his eyes a moment to adjust. The space smelled of motor oil, coffee, and decades of desert dust. Behind a counter stood an older man, tall and lean, with hands that bore the permanent stains of mechanical work and a face weathered by years under the Texas sun. "Afternoon," the man said, not looking up from the automotive magazine he was thumbing through. "Gas pumps are outside if you need 'em. Bathrooms for customers only." "Actually," Elon began, "I need some assistance with my car. It's broken down about a mile back on the highway." Now the man looked up, his eyes sharp blue despite his age taking in Elon's disheveled appearance. "What kind of car?" "It's a Tesla. A prototype, actually." The man's expression hardened slightly. "One of them electric cars?" "Yes. The most advanced on the market, actually." Elon couldn't help adding, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. Despite his situation, the man set down his magazine. "Name's Frank Doyle. This is my place." He didn't offer to shake hands. "And you are?" "Elon Musk." Frank's expression didn't change. If he recognized the name, he gave no indication. "What's the problem with your car, Mr. Musk?" "Complete system failure. The AI shut down and I can't restart it." Frank grunted. "AI, that's your first problem right there. Cars don't need computers telling them how to drive. Been fixing cars for 50 years. And I've never seen a computer improve what a good driver and a simple engine can do." Elon felt a flash of irritation. He'd heard every variation of this argument over the years. The resistance to change, the blind faith in the old ways. Normally, he'd launch into one of his well-rehearsed rebuttals about the future of transportation, the inevitability of autonomous vehicles. But standing here, sweat-soaked and helpless, those arguments felt hollow. "Be that as it may," Elon said carefully, "I'm stranded, and I need help getting my car running again." Frank seemed to consider this for a moment, as if weighing whether an electric car was even worth the trouble. "Got a tow truck out back," he finally said. "Could bring it in, take a look. Can't promise I'll be able to fix one of those computerized contraptions, though." Elon nodded, swallowing his pride. "I would appreciate that." As Frank moved from behind the counter, Elon noticed the slight limp in his gait, the way he favored his right leg. The older man grabbed a set of keys from a hook on the wall. "You comin'?" Frank asked, not bothering to look back as he headed for the door. Elon followed him outside to an ancient tow truck that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than on the road. Frank opened the passenger door for Elon, the hinges protesting loudly. "Hop in," Frank said, "and don't touch any of the buttons. Unlike your fancy car, this one actually works." As they pulled away from the gas station, Elon found himself in an unfamiliar position. He wasn't the visionary entrepreneur charting the course for others to follow. He wasn't the billionaire whose words could shift stock markets. Here, in this dusty corner of Texas, he was just a man with a broken car, dependent on the kindness and expertise of someone who represented everything he was trying to leave behind. And, for the first time in years, Elon Musk wasn't the one in control. The tow truck's suspension groaned as they pulled up beside the stranded Tesla. Frank descended from the driver's seat with surprising agility for a man his age, circling the sleek vehicle like a cautious predator assessing unfamiliar prey. "So this is what people are spending 200 grand on these days," he muttered, running a calloused hand along the car's smooth exterior. "No engine, no soul." Elon bit back a retort. Right now, this man was his only hope of getting back to civilization. He watched as Frank hitched the Tesla to the tow truck with practiced movements, securing it with an efficiency that spoke of decades of experience. The ride back to the garage was largely silent, save for the rattling of the truck and the occasional crackle of an ancient AM radio broadcasting cattle prices and weather reports. Elon found himself staring out the window, feeling strangely disconnected from the digital world that usually surrounded him like a cocoon. When they arrived at Doyle's Gas and Repair, Frank backed the tow truck into a large garage attached to the main building. Inside, the space was surprisingly well organized. Tools hanging in neat rows on pegboards, workbenches clean despite decades of use, floor swept despite the perpetual battle against desert dust. "You built all this yourself?" Elon asked, genuinely impressed by the setup. "When a man's got limited resources, he learns to be efficient," Frank replied, lowering the Tesla onto the concrete floor. He didn't elaborate further, already focused on examining the vehicle. Frank popped the front trunk where an internal combustion engine would normally sit and stared at the complex array of electronics and battery components. "Jesus," he breathed. "It's like looking at the inside of a damn spaceship. Actually, the CPU architecture isn't that different from what we use in our Dragon modules," Elon said, momentarily forgetting his situation as enthusiasm for his technology took over. "The neural network that controls don't need a lecture," Frank interrupted, holding up a hand. "Need to figure out what made it die." He bent over the compartment, squinting. "Where's the actual motor in this thing?" "There are two, one on each axle," Elon explained. "But the problem isn't mechanical, it's in the operating system." Frank scoffed. "That's your first mistake. Cars shouldn't have operating systems. They should have engines a man can understand and fix with his own two hands." He gestured to a 1967 Mustang sitting in the corner of the garage. "That there's a real car. Broke down? Check the spark plugs, the fuel line, the carburetor. Simple, logical." "With respect," Elon countered, unable to help himself. "That simplicity is exactly what we're moving beyond. Electric vehicles eliminate hundreds of moving parts, reduce maintenance, and leave you stranded in the desert when a circuit breaks," Frank finished. He reached for a diagnostic tool, surprisingly modern compared to the rest of his equipment, and connected it to the Tesla's port. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The garage door suddenly swung open, letting in a shaft of bright desert sunlight. A young woman stepped through, carrying a small toolbox and wiping sweat from her brow. She wore oil-stained jeans and a faded NASA t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Grandpa," Mrs. Hernandez called again about her. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as they fell first on the Tesla, then on Elon. "Holy shit, you're Elon Musk." Frank glanced up. "Jenny, language." "Sorry," she said automatically, still staring. "But what are you doing here? In our garage?" "His fancy electric car broke down," Frank answered before Elon could. "Left him stranded about a mile out." Jenny approached, her initial shock giving way to professional curiosity as she examined the Tesla. "Which model is this? It doesn't look like anything on the market." "It's a prototype," Elon explained, finding himself more comfortable talking to someone who at least recognized his work. "Next generation roadster with experimental AI navigation." "The AI that failed," Frank added pointedly. Jenny's eyes lit. "Up. Neural network or reinforcement learning based?" This caught Elon by surprise. "Both, actually. How did you—" "Engineering major, 2 years at UT Austin before—" She trailed off, glancing at her grandfather. "Before I had to come back here." Something in her tone, a mixture of resignation and buried ambition, struck Elon. Before he could inquire further, Frank cleared his throat. "Diagnostics saying there's a critical error in the main battery management system," he announced. "Power cells are fine, but the computer that regulates them is fried." "That's impossible," Elon said, moving to check the readout himself. "Those systems have triple redundancy." "Well, triple redundancy failed you today," Frank replied. He pointed to a specific line of error code. "Look there, temperature spike in the main controller, my guess. Heat got to it. These Texas roads can hit 140 degrees in summer. Computer chips don't like that kind of heat, especially out here where there's nowhere for it to dissipate." Elon studied the diagnostic screen, reluctantly impressed by Frank's assessment. It was exactly the kind of environmental edge case their testing hadn't fully accounted for. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We could try a manual override to bypass the battery management system," Jenny suggested. Route power directly from the cells to the motors. Frank shook his head. Too dangerous. One wrong connection and the whole battery pack could short circuit. I have to get back to Austin tonight, Elon insisted. I've got a board meeting tomorrow morning that I can't miss. Nearest Tesla service center is in El Paso, about 4 hours from here, Jenny said. But they'd have to order the parts from California anyway. Frank stood silently for a moment, considering. Then he gestured to the Tesla. Pop the panel on the left side of the battery pack. Elon did as instructed, revealing more circuitry. See that module there? Frank pointed. That's your problem. Melted the connector. In a normal car, I'd replace the alternator and be done with it, but this? He shook his head. So it can't be fixed, Elon concluded, frustration evident in his voice. Didn't say that, Frank replied. Said it can't be fixed the way your engineers in California would fix it. He went to a workbench and returned with several components that looked nothing like Tesla parts. We could rig a temporary bypass. Won't be pretty, won't be permanent, but it might get you to Austin. Using those, Elon eyed the parts skeptically. Those aren't compatible with Tesla architecture. Electricity is electricity, Frank said simply. Doesn't matter if it's running through a circuit board or a potato. The principles are the same. Elon opened his mouth to argue but stopped himself. What choice did he have? He was stranded in the middle of nowhere, his sophisticated technology rendered useless by the simple reality of desert heat. How long will it take? He asked instead. Few hours if it works at all, Frank replied. But there's a condition. Name it. Frank pointed to a bench with a sink nearby. Wash your hands, roll up those fancy sleeves and help. I'm not fixing this myself while you stand around watching. Jenny suppressed a smile, clearly enjoying the sight of a billionaire being ordered around by her grandfather. Elon hesitated only briefly before nodding. Fair enough. As he rolled up his sleeves and approached the sink, he glanced at the workbench where Frank was already laying out tools. The older man worked with a certainty that came only from a lifetime of solving problems. With his hands, something Elon realized he had moved far away from in recent years, surrounded as he was by teams of engineers who turned his ideas into reality. For all his brilliance in conceptualizing the future, Elon suddenly felt like a novice in Frank's domain, where theory met physical reality in the most immediate way. It was a humbling sensation, and one that left him with an unexpected feeling of respect for the weathered mechanic who was about to teach him a lesson in old-school ingenuity. Hold it steady, Frank instructed, his voice firm but patient as Elon struggled to keep the bypass connector in place while Frank soldered a connection. Hands shaking won't help us here. Elon took a deep breath, willing his fingers to remain still. It had been years, decades really, since he'd done this kind of detailed manual work himself. In college, he'd built computers from scratch, soldering circuits with precision. But somewhere along the way, as his companies grew and his responsibilities expanded, he'd transitioned from builder to visionary. His hands had become more accustomed to signing documents and gesturing during presentations than manipulating physical components. Sorry, Elon muttered, adjusting his grip. It's been a while. Frank glanced up briefly. Figured as much. Soft hands. Tells me you're thinking more than doing these days. The comment stung, but Elon couldn't deny its accuracy. He watched as Frank's weathered hands moved with practiced confidence, connecting wires and testing voltages with an intuition that no AI could replicate. There, Frank said after a moment, setting down the soldering iron. Now for the hard part. We need to bypass the main controller without triggering the safety protocols. Jenny approached, carrying a small fan which she directed at the workstation. Thought you might need this, it's getting hotter in here. Thanks, Elon said, genuinely grateful for both the breeze and her thoughtfulness. As they worked, Frank passed Elon tools without explanation, expecting him to know what to do with them. When Elon hesitated, Frank would demonstrate with a quick, efficient movement, then watch as Elon attempted to replicate it. You know, Frank said after Elon fumbled with a specialized wrench. Used to be, understanding how things worked was just as important as having ideas about how they should work. Elon wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grease across his forehead. I understand the principles. The application is different. That's where theory meets reality, Frank replied. No computer simulation can account for the feel of metal under your fingers, the way a bolt resists just before it gives. The conversation lulled as they focused on a particularly delicate connection. Elon noticed that despite his earlier complaints about technology, Frank's methods were precise and scientific in their own way. There was an empirical quality to his approach: observe, hypothesize, test, adjust. You mentioned NASCAR earlier, Elon said, breaking the silence. You worked there? Frank's expression softened slightly at the memory. 17 years, head mechanic for the Martinez team. Back then, races weren't won just by the driver. They were won in the garage, by men who could coax every last ounce of performance from an engine. What happened? Elon asked, sensing a story. Frank unconsciously rubbed his right leg. Accident in '95. Car came in hot during a pit stop, crushed my leg against the wall. Doctors said I'd never walk again. He gestured around the garage. Proved them wrong, but NASCAR wasn't interested in a mechanic who couldn't move fast enough during pit stops. Elon nodded, seeing the older man in a new light. Here was someone who had faced adversity and adapted, not unlike himself, though in a very different context. So you opened this place? Came back to where I grew up, Frank confirmed. Figured I could still be useful here. Jenny, who had been organizing tools nearby, interjected. Grandpa was the best. People would drive hours just to have him work, on their cars. Still are, Frank corrected with a hint of pride. Just fewer of them these days. Because of electric vehicles? Elon asked. Frank shook his head. Because of computers. Used to be, a man could pop the hood and understand what he was looking at. Now, everything's sealed up, controlled by software. Car breaks down, you don't fix it, you update it. Elon couldn't help defending his vision. But that's progress. Fewer moving parts means fewer things to break. Software can be updated remotely. The average person doesn't need to understand how their vehicle works any more than they need to understand how their smartphone works. And that's where we disagree, Frank said, his voice rising slightly. A car should be something you can fix yourself if you need to. What happens when your fancy update server goes down? When you're stuck in the middle of nowhere with no signal? A car should have a soul, something you can feel and understand. Both of you are stuck in your own worlds, Jenny interrupted, her frustration evident. Grandpa, times change. Not everyone wants to work on their own car. And Mr. Musk, not everyone, can afford to replace their vehicle every time technology advances. The garage fell silent, her words hanging in the air. Elon looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Her NASA t-shirt was worn but clean, her tools organized with the same precision as her grandfather's. There was intelligence in her eyes and something else, a hunger for knowledge that reminded him of himself at her age. You said you studied engineering? He asked. Jenny nodded, a flash of pride crossing her face. Mechanical engineering with a minor in computer science. Made it halfway through my degree before I had to come back. Had to? She hesitated, glancing at Frank. My son Tyler. He's 5 now. His father wasn't in the picture. And then Grandpa's health started failing. Someone needed to help with the station. Elon sensed there was more to the story, but before he could ask, Frank cleared his throat. All right, enough chatter. Let's get back to work. Hand me that multimeter, would you? As the afternoon wore on, Elon found himself surprisingly engaged in the process. There was something satisfying about the immediate feedback of physical work, the way a connection either worked or didn't. The tangible progress as the bypass system took shape. No meetings, no emails, no layers of management between idea and execution. Frank, too, seemed to be warming up, if only slightly. His instructions became less terse, more explanatory. He began to share the why behind each step, revealing a depth of knowledge that transcended mere mechanical skill. You know, Frank said as they tested a connection, your Tesla's not so different from my old NASCAR engines in some ways. Both pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Just different boundaries. Elon recognized the olive branch. Different tools. Same goal. Maximum efficiency. Maximum performance. Exactly, Frank agreed. Though I still say nothing beats the sound of a V8 at full throttle. Wait until you feel the acceleration of dual electric motors, Elon countered with a small smile. 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. Silent but deadly. Frank grunted, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Maybe. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the garage windows, they made their final adjustments to the bypass system. It wasn't elegant by Tesla's standards, a patchwork of standard electrical components integrated with the car's sophisticated systems, but it had a certain resourceful beauty to it. Moment of truth, Frank announced, stepping back. Try it now. Elon slid into the driver's seat, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar anxiety. What if it didn't work? What if their hours of labor had been for nothing? He pressed the power button, holding his breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Nothing. Then slowly, the dashboard display flickered to life. Not the full system, just basic diagnostics and controls. But enough. We've got power, Elon called out, relief washing over him. Motors are responding. Frank allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. Should get you to Austin. Drive steady, not too fast. The bypass won't handle any fancy autonomous features, so you'll have to drive it like a normal car. Actually drive it myself? Elon raised an eyebrow. How 20th century? Frank almost smiled. Sometimes old ways are the only ways. As Elon stepped out of the car, he was surprised to realize that his hands were covered in grease, his expensive shirt stained beyond salvation, and yet he felt a sense of accomplishment that had become rare in his daily life. He had built something with his hands again, had overcome a challenge through direct physical effort. Thank you, he said, extending his hand to Frank. I couldn't have done this without you. Frank hesitated for just a moment before accepting the handshake, his calloused palm rough against Elon's. You did all right, for a tech billionaire. Jenny smiled, watching the exchange. High praise from him, believe me. Elon reached for his wallet. How much do I owe you for the parts and labor? Frank waved him off. Parts were mostly scrap I had lying around. Labor was educational for both of us, I'd say. I insist, Elon pressed. Your time is valuable. So is yours, apparently, Frank replied. Let's call it even. You learned something about old-school mechanics, and I learned that maybe, there's something to these electric cars after all. Jenny looked between them, clearly surprised by her grandfather's uncharacteristic generosity. At least let me ring up the parts, Grandpa. Business is business. Frank sighed, giving in. Fine, but just the parts. As Jenny led Elon to the small office to settle the bill, he found himself looking back at the garage, at the ordered chaos of tools and parts, at Frank already cleaning up their workstation with methodical precision. There was a whole world here, a kind of knowledge that couldn't be digitized or automated, passed down through generations of hands-on experience. The invoice Jenny prepared was modest, embarrassingly so, given the hours of work and expertise that had gone into the repair. As Elon handed over his credit card, he noticed a framed photograph on the counter. A younger Frank stood proudly next to a NASCAR vehicle, arm around a smiling woman who had Jenny's eyes. Your grandmother? Elon asked, nodding toward the photo. Jenny nodded. She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. That's when things really started getting tough around here. Elon was about to respond when a small voice called out from the doorway. To the living quarters, Mommy? Is it dinner time yet? A young boy, no more than 5, stood there clutching a toy car in one hand and a worn book about space in the other. His dark hair and eyes mirrored Jenny's, but there was a seriousness to his expression that reminded Elon of Frank. In a little bit, sweetie, Jenny replied. Mr. Musk is just getting ready to leave. The boy's eyes widened. Are you the space rocket man? Despite his exhaustion, Elon couldn't help but smile. That's me. And you must be Tyler. The boy nodded solemnly. I'm going to build rockets too. Bigger ones than yours. Tyler, Jenny admonished gently. But Elon laughed. Good. The world needs more rocket builders, he said. Maybe you'll work for SpaceX someday. Nuh-uh. Tyler shook his head firmly. I'm gonna have my own company. Even better, Elon agreed, impressed by the child's confidence. As the payment processed, Elon found himself looking around the small office. Bills were stacked neatly on the desk, most of them stamped with final notices. A brochure for community. College classes lay open to a page about night courses in engineering. A calendar on the wall marked the days until school started again, with Tyler's first day of kindergarten circled in red. It was a glimpse into a life utterly different from his own, one of modest dreams and immediate concerns, of family bonds and daily struggles. And yet, there was a dignity to it, a purpose that resonated with him. The credit card machine beeped, completing the transaction. Jenny handed him the receipt with a professional smile. You're all set, Mr. Musk. Drive safely. Elon nodded, suddenly reluctant to leave. There was something here, something important that he couldn't quite articulate. As he turned to go, his eyes fell on a for sale sign leaning against the wall behind the counter, not yet placed outside. You're selling the station? He asked, the question escaping before he could consider it. Jenny's smile faltered. We're considering our options. It's been tough the last few years. Fewer customers, higher costs. And with Tyler starting school, she trailed off, then squared her shoulders. But we'll figure it out, we always do. Elon nodded, sensing it wasn't his place to inquire further. He returned to the garage where Frank was closing up the Teslas. Panels. Should hold, Frank said, patting the car's hood. But I wouldn't push it. No racing, no autopilot, just straight driving to Austin. Then get it to your people for a proper fix. Understood, Elon agreed. And Frank, thank you. Not just for the repair, but for the lesson. Frank's eyebrows raised slightly. What lesson is that? That sometimes the old ways have value. That there's wisdom and experience that can't be programmed into an AI. Frank nodded slowly. Might be some truth to that. And maybe there's something to be said for your newfangled ideas too. World keeps turning after all. As Elon carefully backed the Tesla out of the garage, he found himself taking a final look at Doyle's Gas and Repair, at the faded sign, the ancient pumps, the small family that had helped him when he needed it most. Something about the scene stuck with him, tugging at thoughts he usually kept buried beneath layers of innovation and forward momentum. The sun was setting as he pulled onto the highway, casting long shadows across the desert landscape. The Tesla hummed quietly beneath him, its jury-rigged systems a testament to the unlikely collaboration between cutting-edge technology and old-school ingenuity. But as he accelerated toward Austin, Elon couldn't shake the image of that for sale sign, or the determination in Jenny's eyes, or the dreams of a 5-year-old boy who wanted to build rockets. He couldn't help but wonder about the future of places like Doyle's, and the people who kept them running, in the world he was helping to create. And for the first time in a long while, Elon Musk found himself questioning not just how to move forward, but what might be lost along the way. The highway stretched before Elon, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkening desert. His hands gripped the steering wheel, actually driving, not just supervising, as Frank had insisted. The Tesla's jury-rigged systems hummed beneath him, a constant reminder of the afternoon's unexpected detour. He should have been mentally preparing for tomorrow's board meeting, reviewing quarterly projections and launch timelines in his head. Instead, his thoughts kept returning to Doyle's Gas and Repair, to Frank's weathered hands working with quiet expertise, to Jenny's determined resilience, to young Tyler clutching a space book and declaring his intention to build rockets. And that, for sale sign, tucked away but unmistakable. 10 miles down the road, Elon abruptly pulled over, tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. He sat for a moment, the engine's soft whir the only sound in the gathering dusk. Then, decisively, he turned the car around. The lights of Doyle's were still on when he pulled back into the lot. Through the garage window, he could see Frank cleaning, tools, methodically returning each to its proper place. Jenny stood at the old-fashioned register, counting the day's meager earnings. The bell jingled as Elon pushed open the door. Both Doyles looked up in surprise. "Forget something?" Frank asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yes," Elon said simply. "I forgot to ask why." Frank's brow furrowed. "Why what?" "Why you're selling the station." Frank and Jenny exchanged glances. It was Jenny who finally spoke. "How did you—" "I saw the sign in your office," Elon explained. "I know it's none of my business, but—" He paused, searching for the right words. "After what you did for me today, I'd like to understand." Frank's expression hardened. "It's like I told you. World keeps turning. Some things get left behind." "That's not an answer," Elon pressed gently. Frank sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 70-plus years. He gestured toward the small kitchenette attached to the garage. "Might as well sit down for this." The kitchenette was modest, but spotless. A small table, 4 chairs, a coffee maker that had seen better days, and a refrigerator humming loudly in the corner. Frank put on a pot of coffee while Jenny checked on Tyler, who was playing in the adjoining room. When they were all seated, mugs of strong black coffee before them, Frank began to explain. "Station's been in the family since my father built it. In '68, he said, his voice matter-of-fact but with an undercurrent of pride. Back then, this highway was the main route between El Paso and San Antonio. Did good business, real good. Then they built the interstate," Jenny added. 15 miles north. Suddenly we weren't on the way to anywhere anymore." Frank nodded. "Still, we managed. Folks around here needed a mechanic they could trust. I kept the prices fair, did honest work. We got by. Until the recession hit in 2008, Jenny continued. Then things got tough. And when the big chain stores started offering cheap oil changes, tire services, we adapted, Frank insisted. Always have. Added the convenience store section. Jenny set up the computer system for inventory. There was a hint of defensiveness in his tone, as if he needed Elon to understand they hadn't simply given up. "So what changed?" Elon asked. Frank and Jenny exchanged another look. It was Frank who finally answered. "Martha, my wife, Jenny's grandmother, got sick 3 years ago. Cancer. Insurance wouldn't cover all the treatments. Had to take out a second mortgage on the place. I came back to help," Jenny said quietly. "Thought it would be temporary, just until Grandma got better." "But she didn't," Elon said softly, understanding dawning. Frank shook his head once, his jaw tightening. "Fought like hell for 18 months, bravest woman I've ever known." A silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by the ticking of an ancient clock on the wall and the distant sound of Tyler playing with his toys. Between the medical bills, the mortgage, and the drop in business, Jenny gestured helplessly. "We're underwater. Bank's been patient, but their patience is running out." "Why not modernize?" Elon asked. "Add electric charging stations? Expand your services?" Frank's bitter laugh held no humor. "With what money? EV charging setup costs at least $100,000 for the equipment alone, let alone the installation. And grid upgrades. We can barely keep the lights on." "And it's not just the money," Jenny added. "It's the skills, the certifications. Modern cars need modern diagnostics. The equipment costs a fortune, and it's all proprietary. You need special training just to access the systems." Elon felt a pang of recognition. His companies had been at the forefront of this shift, creating sophisticated vehicles and systems that, by design, could only be serviced by authorized technicians with specialized tools. "Not everyone can afford to change," Frank said, echoing Jenny's earlier point. "Some of us just try to hold on as long as we can." The words hit Elon harder than he expected. How many Frank Doyles were out there? People with valuable skills and knowledge being left behind not because they were resistant to progress, but because progress hadn't made room for them? "What will you do?" he asked. "If you sell?" "Jenny's got a standing job offer at the AutoZone in El Paso," Frank said. "Manager position, benefits, steady hours. And you?" Frank shrugged. "Got a cousin in Arizona. Says I can stay with him until I figure things out." "And your NASCAR memorabilia? Your tools?" Elon gestured toward the garage, where decades of Frank's life were organized on pegboards and shelves. "Sell," What I can. Store the rest, maybe. Frank's voice was steady, but Elon noticed his hand tightening around the coffee mug. It's just stuff. But it wasn't just stuff, and Elon knew it. It was a legacy, a life's work, an identity. Jenny must have seen something in Elon's expression because she shook her head. We're not looking for charity, Mr. Musk. We didn't bring you back here for that. I came back on my own, Elon reminded her. And I'm not thinking about charity. I'm thinking about waste. Waste? Frank repeated, bristling slightly. Yes, waste. Elon said firmly. You have knowledge that's taken decades to accumulate, skills that can't be taught in a classroom, and you're going to walk away from it all because the system has no place for you anymore. That's not just a personal tragedy, it's a waste of human capital. Frank studied him for a long moment. Pretty words. But that's the way the world works. Big fish eat little fish. Always have. It doesn't have to be that way, Elon countered. Innovation doesn't have to mean elimination. Sometimes it can mean integration. What are you suggesting? Jenny asked, a cautious curiosity in her voice. Before Elon could answer, Tyler burst into the kitchen, proudly holding up a drawing. Mommy, look, I drew our gas station with rocket boosters. Jenny smiled, taking the paper. That's beautiful, honey. Very futuristic. Elon glanced at the childish drawing, a rectangle with pumps that indeed had flames shooting out the bottom. Something about the simple creativity of it sparked an idea. May I? He asked, holding out his hand for the drawing. Tyler reluctantly handed it over, watching Elon suspiciously. Elon studied the picture, then looked up at Frank. What if your gas station could be both? Old and new? Frank frowned. What do you mean? The world is changing, yes, Elon acknowledged. But that doesn't mean every corner of it has to look the same. What if Doyle's could be a bridge between worlds? You're talking in riddles, son, Frank said, but there was a hint of interest in his voice. Elon turned the drawing over and pulled a pen from his pocket. He began to sketch rapidly, a rougher, adult version of Tyler's drawing, but with additions. Solar panels on the roof, charging stations alongside gas pumps, an expanded garage area. What if you could service both kinds of vehicles? Elon explained as he drew. Keep the gas pumps for traditional cars but add charging stations for electrics? Keep your mechanical expertise but supplement it with updated diagnostic equipment, Frank? Leaned forward, studying the sketch. Sounds nice in theory. Doesn't solve the money problem. There are programs, Elon said, warming to his subject. Government incentives for green energy installations, grants for small business modernization. He glanced at Jenny. Scholarships for continuing education in emerging technologies. We've looked into all that, Jenny said, though her voice held less certainty now. The applications are complicated, competitive, and most require matching funds we don't have. What if you had a partner? Elon suggested. Someone who could help navigate the red tape, provide the initial investment? Frank's eyes narrowed. You talking about yourself? Elon didn't answer directly. Did you know that one of the biggest complaints about electric vehicles is the lack of service stations in rural areas? Tesla owners have to plan their trips carefully, especially in regions like this. So? Frank asked, though Elon could tell he was following the logic. So there's a market opportunity. A service station that can handle both traditional and electric vehicles would fill a gap, especially one with experienced mechanics who understand cars from the ground up, not just the computer systems. Jenny was catching on now, her eyes brightening. Like a hybrid business model? Exactly, Elon nodded. Not just abandoning the old for the new, but finding ways to make them work together. Honor the best of the past while embracing the future. Frank sat back, arms crossed, considering. For a long moment, no one spoke. Why would you do this? He finally asked. What's in it for you? It was a fair question, and one Elon hadn't fully examined himself. Why was he sitting here in a rundown gas station kitchen, sketching out business plans with people he'd met only hours ago? Honestly, Elon said after a moment, I'm not entirely sure. Part of it is practical. Having reliable service stations for Teslas in rural areas would benefit my customers. Part of it is, call it intellectual curiosity. I want to see if this model could work. But there was more to it than that, and as he spoke, Elon began to understand his own motivations more clearly. And part of it is because today reminded me of something I've been missing. The direct connection between idea and execution. Watching you work, Frank, the way you approach problems, the way you understand machines at a fundamental level, it made me realize there's value there that shouldn't be lost. Frank studied him. Skepticism still evident, but mixed now with something else, a cautious consideration. I'm not interested in a handout, he said firmly. I'm not offering one. Elon replied. I'm talking about a business proposition, an investment with potential returns, and not just financial ones. What other kind are there? Frank asked. Elon thought about the satisfaction he'd felt when the Tesla powered up after their repairs, the pride in creating something tangible and solving a problem with his own hands. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Knowledge transfer, he said. You know things about mechanical systems that my engineers could learn from. They know things about electrical systems that could expand your capabilities. Jenny leaned forward. So you're suggesting what, exactly? A pilot program, Elon said, the idea taking shape as he spoke. We retrofit Doyle's with charging stations, updated diagnostic equipment, and solar power. You maintain your independence, but with Tesla as a partner. We list you as an authorized service center for basic repairs and maintenance in rural areas. And the debt? Frank asked bluntly. The mortgage? Elon considered this. That would be part of the investment package. But you'd retain ownership, control. This would be your place, run your way. I'd be a silent partner. Frank's expression remained guarded, but Elon could see he was thinking it through. Jenny looked between them, hope and caution warring in her expression. It sounds too good to be true, she finally said. Most innovative ideas do at first, Elon replied. That's usually a good sign. Tyler, who had been surprisingly quiet during this exchange, suddenly piped up. Does this mean we're not moving to El Paso? Jenny smoothed his hair. I don't know yet, sweetie. Mr. Musk is just sharing some ideas. But I don't want to move, Tyler insisted. I like it here, and Grandpa needs us. The simple truth of the child's statement hung in the air. Frank's expression softened as he looked at his great-grandson. It's complicated, buddy, he said gently. Elon watched the interplay between them, 3 generations bound by love and circumstance, facing a future that seemed determined to pull them apart. And in that moment, his proposition shifted from an interesting business experiment to something more personal. Look, he said, I'm not asking for a decision tonight. This is something you should think about, discuss as a family. I'll have my team draw up a detailed proposal, funding, logistics, expected outcomes. No obligation, no strings attached. Just consider it. Frank looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. We'll look at your proposal. It wasn't an agreement, but it was an opening. Elon stood, suddenly aware of how late it had gotten. The board meeting in Austin was less than 12 hours away, and he still had a 3-hour drive ahead of him. I should get going, he said, but I'll be in touch, and Frank, thank you again. Not just for the car, but for the conversation. It's given me a lot to think about. Frank stood as well, extending his hand. The handshake was firmer this time, less reluctant. Drive safe and remember, no autopilot, that patch job won't handle it. Elon smiled. I'll drive it the old-fashioned way, promise. As he walked back to the Tesla, Jenny followed him out. Mr. Musk, she said quietly, once they were out of Frank's earshot, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you should know. My grandfather is proud, very proud. If this is going to work, it has to be a real partnership, not a charity case. I understand, Elon assured her. And I meant what I said about the knowledge transfer. Frank has expertise that can't be taught in engineering schools. That has real value. Jenny studied him, as if trying to determine his Sincerity. Why are you really doing this? You barely know us. It was a question Elon was still asking himself. The rational part of his brain, the part that had built multiple billion-dollar companies, was already calculating the logistics, the costs, the potential return on investment. But there was something deeper driving this impulse, something that had less to do with business and more to do with the connection he'd felt in that garage. Sometimes, he said carefully, we get so focused on creating the future that we forget to bring everyone along with us. Maybe this is a small step toward fixing that. Jenny nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. Well, whatever your reasons, thank you for considering it. As Elon drove away, the lights of Doyle's Gas and Repair growing smaller in his rear-view mirror, he felt a strange mixture of emotions. Part of him wondered if he was being impulsive, letting sentiment cloud his business judgment. Another part recognized the potential in what he'd proposed, not just for the Doyles, but as a model that could potentially be replicated. But mostly, he felt a sense of purpose that went beyond quarterly reports and stock prices. For the first time in years, he was thinking not just about what technology could do, but about who it was for. About the human element that sometimes got lost in the relentless march of progress. The Tesla hummed beneath him, jury-rigged but functional, a testament to what could happen when old wisdom met new ideas. As he pulled onto the main highway toward Austin, Elon found himself smiling. Tomorrow he would ask his team to draw up the proposal. He would set the wheels in motion for what might be a small revolution in rural service stations. But tonight, as he drove through the Texas darkness, he would simply reflect on how an unexpected breakdown had led to an unexpected breakthrough. The stars shone brilliantly above the desert highway, distant and eternal. They had witnessed countless transformations on the earth below them, from horse-drawn carriages to combustion engines to electric motors. They would witness many more. The question wasn't whether change would come, but how it would come, and who would be left behind. And as the miles rolled past beneath his wheels, Elon found himself increasingly certain that the encounter at Doyle's Gas and Repair wasn't just a detour in his journey, but perhaps a necessary course correction, a reminder that true innovation wasn't just about replacing the old with the new, but about finding ways to honor the past while building the future. By the time he reached Austin, his mind was already racing with possibilities, not just for the Doyles, but for the many other Frank Doyles across the country, skilled craftsmen and women whose expertise was being rendered obsolete, not because it lacked value, but because the system had no place for it. What if there could be a different kind of progress? One that carried people forward instead of leaving them behind? The city lights of Austin appeared on the horizon, a constellation of human innovation spread across the Texas landscape. But for once, Elon's thoughts weren't on the gleaming future those lights represented. They were on a small, fading gas station in the middle of nowhere, and the unlikely lesson in humanity he'd found there. The boardroom on the 32nd floor of the Austin high-rise hummed with the quiet energy of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, but Elon Musk's attention was focused inward, on the faces of his executive team as they discussed production, timelines, and supply chain optimizations for the upcoming quarter. And with the new battery fabrication process, we're looking at a 12% increase in energy density with only a 4% rise in production costs, his chief technology officer was saying, gesturing toward a complex graph on the digital display wall. Elon nodded, making appropriate comments and asking relevant questions. But part of his mind remained in the desert, in a small garage where an old man with calloused hands had shown him a different kind of expertise, one born of decades of hands-on experience rather than advanced degrees in algorithms. The simulation. Models predict a 22% improvement in cold weather performance, another executive added. Though we should note that extreme heat conditions still present some challenges. Heat. The word jolted Elon fully into the present. Extreme heat, like the Texas desert where his car had failed, where a supposedly perfect system had been undone by a basic environmental factor that Frank Doyle had identified within minutes. Have we tested the system in sustained desert conditions? Elon interrupted. Not just lab simulations, but actual, Field testing in places like West Texas? The room fell silent. His executives exchanged glances. We've conducted thermal testing in controlled environments up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The head of testing replied carefully. But not prolonged exposure in actual desert conditions. Elon leaned forward. Schedule it. Find the hottest, most remote stretches of highway in the Southwest and run full testing protocols. I want real-world data, not just simulations. His COO made a note, then cleared his throat. That will require additional budget allocation for the quarter, and it might delay the certification timeline by. Make it happen, Elon said firmly. Better to find the weaknesses now than have customers stranded in the middle of nowhere. The meeting continued, but Elon's mind had made a subtle yet significant shift. Every proposal, every projection, every sleek presentation was now being filtered through a new lens. How would this work in the real world? Not just for early adopters in tech-friendly cities, but for people like Frank Doyle and his granddaughter, living in places where the future seemed to be passing by. Elon, your thoughts on the timetable? His COO asked, drawing him back to the present. It's ambitious but achievable, he replied smoothly. Push the engineering team on the thermal management issue. We can't risk another delay. The meeting continued. Decisions were made, directives issued. After 2 hours, the executives filed out, leaving Elon alone with his assistant, who handed him a stack of documents requiring his signature. And your jet is scheduled for 4 p.m., she added, unless you need to adjust the departure time. Actually, Elon said, making a sudden decision, I'll need about an hour with the legal team before we leave. And get me Jennifer Chen from the Tesla Service Network division. May I tell them what this concerns? His assistant asked, already typing notes into her tablet. Elon hesitated, then simply said, a new pilot program I'm considering. Rural service. Infrastructure. When his assistant had gone, Elon walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling city below. Austin represented the future he was helping to build. Tech-forward, rapidly growing, constantly innovating. But his mind kept returning to Doyle's gas and repair, to a family fighting to preserve their legacy in a world that seemed determined to render them obsolete. He pulled out his phone and swiped through the photos he'd discreetly taken. The worn, but meticulously organized tools in Frank's garage, the ancient but lovingly maintained gas pumps, the for sale sign that had stopped him in his tracks. Then he opened his browser and pulled up the county property records he'd looked up the night before. The mortgage statements told a stark story. Doyle's gas and repair was 3 months from foreclosure. The second mortgage taken out for Martha, Doyle's cancer treatments, had pushed the family to the financial breaking point. No traditional bank would refinance given the property's location and declining business. Elon zoomed in on the satellite view of the property. The station sat at a crossroads that had once been significant, but was now bypassed by the interstate 15 miles to the north. Yet it wasn't completely isolated. It served a rural community that would only become more stranded as traditional. Gas stations continued to close across the country. He switched to demographic data for the region. Average income below state median. Population primarily employed in agriculture and resource extraction. Electric vehicle ownership near zero. Not exactly a prime market for Tesla expansion, and yet Elon closed his browser and made another call. Raj, I need you to set up a Delaware LLC. Today, if possible. Keep it separate from our usual corporate structure. And I'll need a secure transfer of personal funds, not company money. His CFO's voice came through, puzzled but professional. All right, what's the purpose of the entity? Real estate investment, Elon replied simply. Small scale, private venture. Any particular reason for the urgency? Raj asked. Elon considered how to answer. Let's just say I had an enlightening experience recently that's made me think differently about our approach to rural markets. After ending the call, Elon opened his laptop and began drafting an outline himself, something he rarely did these days, with teams of people usually handling the details of implementation. But this project felt different, personal. He wanted to shape its contours with his own hands before handing it off. He created a new document and titled it Project Horizon, Rural Service Infrastructure Initiative. Then he began typing, the ideas flowing faster than his fingers could capture them. The plan started simply enough. Purchase the Doyle property through the anonymous LLC, eliminate their debt, and modernize the facility. But as he wrote, the concept expanded. What if this wasn't just about one gas station in West Texas? What if it could become a template for a new kind of infrastructure? One that bridged the gap between the fading fossil fuel economy and the emerging electric future. He sketched diagrams of hybrid service stations, preserving the character and function of traditional gas stations while incorporating charging stations, solar arrays, and modern diagnostic equipment. Not sterile identical charging pods, but places with history and personality, where both conventional and electric vehicle owners could feel welcome. Jennifer Chen, Director of Service Network Development, arrived 30 minutes later. She was young, ambitious, and thoroughly confused about why she'd been summoned for an unscheduled meeting with the CEO. "Have a seat," Elon said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "What do you know about rural service infrastructure?" Chen looked, momentarily startled but recovered quickly. "It's one of our biggest challenges for widespread EV adoption," she replied. "Outside major corridors, charging availability drops significantly. Rural areas are particularly underserved." "And what's our current approach to addressing this?" Chen outlined the standard strategy, focusing on high-traffic corridors first, then gradually expanding outward, prioritizing locations based on existing Tesla ownership density and projected growth. "So we're essentially following demand, not creating it," Elon observed. "That's one way to put it," Chen acknowledged. "Our infrastructure budget isn't unlimited, so we have to prioritize markets with proven interest." "Which creates a chicken and egg problem," Elon pointed out. "Rural communities don't buy electric vehicles because there's no charging infrastructure, and we don't build infrastructure because there are no electric vehicles." Chen nodded, clearly wondering where this was going. Elon pushed his laptop toward her, showing the outline he'd been working on. "What if we tried a different approach? Not building standardized supercharger stations, but partnering with existing gas stations and repair shops to create hybrid facilities." As Chen read through his notes, her expression shifted from confusion to cautious interest. "This is unorthodox," she said finally. "But I see the potential. Using existing businesses rather than building from scratch would leverage local knowledge and customer relationships." "Exactly," Elon agreed. "And it would preserve jobs and businesses that might otherwise disappear as the transition to electric accelerates. But the investment required to retrofit these stations would be significant," Chen pointed out. "And the return might not justify the expenditure in purely financial terms, at least not in the short term." "What if the return isn't just financial?" Elon asked. "What if it's also about securing goodwill in communities that have felt left behind by technological progress? About creating allies instead of obsolescence?" Chen studied him with new interest. "This isn't just about charging stations, is it?" "No," Elon admitted. "It's about rethinking how we implement change, not just replacing the old with the new, but finding ways for them to coexist and complement each other." By the time his jet took off that evening, the pieces were already in motion. The LLC, Desert Horizons Investment Partners, existed on paper, with Elon as its sole member but his name buried in layers of legal anonymity. His personal legal team had drafted the necessary documents. His assistant had compiled research on government grants for rural business development and green energy infrastructure. Chen had agreed to develop a detailed implementation plan for the hybrid service station concept, starting with Doyle's as a pilot but potentially expanding to other rural locations if successful. As the jet climbed through the clouds, Elon reviewed the file his team had compiled on Jenny Doyle. Her academic records were impressive. She'd maintained a 3.8 GPA at UT Austin while working part-time before her unexpected pregnancy, and her grandmother's illness had forced her to withdraw. A talented engineer lost to circumstance. Her withdrawn status form included a personal statement explaining her decision. Elon read it twice, struck by the matter-of-fact way she described putting her dreams on hold. While I remained committed to completing my degree in mechanical engineering, family circumstances require that I temporarily withdraw from the program. My grandmother's illness and my responsibilities as a single mother make it impossible for me to continue at this time. I hope to return when circumstances allow. There was no self-pity in those words, just as there had been none when she'd briefly mentioned her situation in the garage. Just a quiet resilience that reminded him, oddly, of Frank's weathered determination. Elon made another call, this time to the dean of engineering at his alma mater, a woman who owed her research funding to his foundation. "Barbara, I need a favor," he began, explaining what he wanted without revealing why. A full scholarship for a promising student who had to pause her education, remote learning options, flexible scheduling for a single mother. "We don't typically make such accommodations," the dean hedged. "Our program is designed for full-time in-person commitment." "I understand," Elon replied. "But perhaps it's time to rethink that approach. How many talented engineers are we losing because the system isn't flexible enough to accommodate their life circumstances?" "It's not just about flexibility," the dean argued. "It's about maintaining academic standards and program integrity." "Then let's create something new," Elon countered. "A pilot program for non-traditional students with demonstrated academic excellence. My foundation will fund it completely. Scholarships, technology, support services, whatever it takes. Jenny Doyle will be the first participant, but not the last." The dean was silent for a moment, considering. "Send me the details," she finally said. "No promises, but I'll take it to the committee." Elon knew that with the right funding package, the committee would approve. Money had a way of making the impossible suddenly possible in academic settings. But he was careful to structure the proposal as a legitimate educational initiative, not just a one-off favor. Jenny Doyle would receive a scholarship, yes, but she would earn it through her academic performance and contribute to the program's development. As the jet cruised at altitude, Elon opened his laptop again and began drafting personal notes for the project team. Specific details about how the Doyle station should be approached, what should be preserved, what could be enhanced. The more he wrote, the more he realized how deeply the brief encounter had affected him. He found himself remembering specific details, the precise way Frank had organized his tools, the NASA sticker on the battered toolbox, the faded racing, photographs on the wall, the careful, deliberate way he'd taught Elon to make the bypass connection. These weren't just nostalgic trappings. They were physical manifestations of a lifetime of expertise, a knowledge base that couldn't be easily replicated or digitized. By the time his jet landed in California, Elon had set in motion a chain of events that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the Doyle family. But as he reviewed the plans one final time before sending them to his implementation team, he found himself making unexpected adjustments. Initially, he'd considered simply buying the gas station outright, paying off the mortgages, and converting it entirely to a Tesla service center. Clean, efficient, forward-looking. But now he deleted that directive, replacing it with something more nuanced. "Preserve the existing structure and aesthetic of Doyle's Gas and Repair," he wrote. "Retain the vintage gas pumps as functional units alongside new EV charging stations. Upgrade the garage equipment while maintaining its current organization and character." He paused, then added, "All changes subject to owner approval. This is to be presented as a partnership, not an acquisition." It wasn't the most efficient approach, from a business perspective. It would have been simpler to start fresh, to bulldoze the old and build something sleek and modern in its place. But that would erase everything that made Doyle special. The history embedded in its walls, the knowledge accumulated over decades of hands-on problem-solving. The next morning, Elon convened a small, hand-picked team to implement what was now officially called Project Horizon. They gathered in a conference room at his private office, away from the main Tesla campus, a deliberate choice to separate this initiative from regular corporate channels. "I want to be absolutely clear about something," he told them after outlining the project parameters. "This is not a PR exercise. There will be no press releases, no social media announcements, no corporate branding opportunities. If I see so much as a Twitter mention connecting me or Tesla to this project, I'll know exactly who to hold responsible. His head of public relations looked particularly crestfallen at this directive. But Elon, this kind of community investment story would generate tremendous positive media coverage. It humanizes you and the brand in a way that's exactly why we're not publicizing it, Elon interrupted. The moment this becomes about generating good press for me or for Tesla, it loses its purpose. This is about doing the right thing because it's the right thing, not because it looks good on a quarterly impact report. As the team dispersed to begin implementation, Elon's assistant lingered behind. "This is unusual, even for you," she observed. "May I ask what's really driving this?" Elon considered the question for a long moment. Have you ever had a moment when something you've been looking at for years suddenly appears completely different? Not because it changed, but because your perspective did. "I suppose so," she replied cautiously. "When my car broke down in the desert, I was just annoyed at the inconvenience," Elon explained. "But what started as a frustrating detour became something else. A window into a world that's being left behind by the very future I'm helping to create." He described the Doyles, Frank's quiet expertise, Jenny's deferred dreams, young Tyler's innocent ambition. And I realized that in our rush to build the future, we sometimes forget to bring everyone along with us. We create technological wonders, but we also create obsolescence not just of machines but of knowledge, of livelihoods, of entire ways of life. His assistant nodded, beginning to understand. "So this project is what? Atonement?" "No." Elon shook his head. "It's course correction, a reminder that innovation doesn't always have to replace what came before. Sometimes it can enhance it, preserve it, give it new purpose." As he reviewed the final documents before digitally signing them, Elon realized that this project had become unexpectedly personal. He was one of the richest men on the planet, accustomed to solving problems at global scale through technology and innovation. Yet here he was, devoting considerable resources to saving one small gas station in the Texas desert. Why? The question nagged at him as he authorized the first wire transfer that would quietly pay off the Doyles' mortgages. Perhaps it was because Frank Doyle represented something increasingly rare in the world Elon was helping to create. A direct, tangible connection between human skill and mechanical problem-solving. Perhaps it was because he saw in Jenny a reflection of his younger self, talented, ambitious, but constrained by circumstances beyond her control. Or perhaps it was simply because for a few hours in that desert garage, he'd been reminded of what it felt like to build something with his own hands, to solve a problem directly rather than through layers of organization and delegation. Whatever, the reason, as the wheels began turning on what his team had dubbed Project Horizon, Elon insisted on two unusual conditions: absolute confidentiality and meticulous attention to detail. The Desert Horizons LLC would act through intermediaries. His name would appear nowhere. The Doyles would be approached not with charity, but with a business proposition, one structured to preserve their dignity and independence. The paperwork should show a consortium of investors interested in developing rural EV infrastructure, he instructed his legal team. The scholarship for Jenny Doyle should come from a foundation supporting women in STEM, not from me personally. His PR director, accustomed to maximizing publicity for every corporate initiative, was baffled. "But this could be great press, Elon. Tech billionaire saves small-town business. People would love that story." "That's exactly why we're not telling it," Elon replied firmly. "This isn't about publicity. It's about doing the right thing the right way." The PR director persisted, "But the optics would be fantastic, especially in rural communities where Tesla is often seen as an elite coastal brand. This could change perceptions across—" "No," Elon cut him off, his tone brooking no further argument. "The moment this becomes a PR exercise is the moment it loses its meaning. For Frank Doyle, accepting help is already going to be difficult enough. If he feels like he's being turned into a publicity stunt, he'll walk away, and I wouldn't blame him. Over the next few days, amid product launches and strategic meetings, Elon found himself repeatedly checking on the progress of Project Horizon. He reviewed architectural renderings for the station upgrades, sent back designs that were too modern or corporate-looking, insisted on materials and finishes that would complement the station's existing character rather than replace it. But these vintage-style pumps cost 3 times as much as standard units. His project manager protested during one late-night video call. "Then we pay 3 times as much," Elon replied simply. "The aesthetic consistency matters. Frank Doyle has spent his life creating and maintaining a certain kind of place. We're enhancing it, not erasing it." The project manager looked dubious. With all due respect, most people wouldn't notice the difference between authentic vintage pumps and modern ones with a retro facade. "Frank would notice," Elon said quietly, "and that's who matters here." The scholarship program presented its own challenges. The dean had come back with tentative approval, but the university's bureaucracy was proving difficult to navigate. Specialized distance learning programs required curriculum modifications, faculty buy-in, and technology infrastructure that didn't exist. "We're talking at least a year of development before we could launch something like this," the dean explained during a follow-up call. "That's not acceptable," Elon replied. "Jenny Doyle has already put her education on hold for 3 years. I need solutions, not timelines." After a moment of strained silence, the dean said, "There is one possibility. We have a small experimental program in the engineering department, invitation only, originally designed for our faculty who are doing field research in remote locations. Students receive personalized instruction through virtual platforms, with periodic intensive on-campus sessions." "Could it be adapted for someone in Jenny's situation?" Elon asked. "Possibly. It would require significant resources, dedicated faculty mentors, specialized equipment, support services. All of which my foundation will provide," Elon assured her. "And not just for Jenny. I want this to be the beginning of something sustainable, a pathway for talented individuals who don't fit the traditional student model." By the end of the week, the pieces had begun to align. The scholarship program, officially named the Martha Doyle Memorial Scholarship for Women in Engineering, in honor of Frank's late wife, had been established with an initial endowment of $15 million. Jenny would be its first recipient, but the program was structured to support 10 students annually going forward, with preference given to women from rural communities who were caregivers or had other non-traditional circumstances. The business proposal had taken shape as well. Desert Horizons LLC would pay off the existing mortgages on Doyle's gas and repair and provide capital for modernization and expansion. In return, the station would become a pilot location for a new concept in rural service infrastructure, a hybrid facility capable of servicing both traditional and electric vehicles, with Frank maintaining operational control and receiving a majority share of the profits. The proposal included detailed plans for solar arrays that would power the charging stations, updated diagnostic equipment that would interface with both conventional and electric vehicles, and a modernized convenience store section that would cater to both types of travelers. But most importantly, it preserved the character and legacy of what Frank had built. Elon reviewed the final documents one last time before they were sent. The business proposal was solid, the terms generous, but not patronizing. The scholarship materials were professional and legitimate. He'd actually funded a full program, not just a one-off grant for Jenny. None of it had his name attached. As he approved the final package for delivery, his assistant gave him a curious look. "You've been unusually invested in this project," she observed. "May I ask why?" Elon considered the question carefully. "Have you ever had a moment when you suddenly see your own work from a completely different perspective?" he finally asked. "When something you've taken for granted is suddenly cast in a new light?" His assistant nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't sure where he was going with this. "I've spent my career pushing the boundaries of what's possible," Elon continued. "Electric cars, renewable energy, space exploration, all of it aimed at creating a better future. But sometimes in that push forward, we don't fully account for who gets left behind." He gestured toward the Project Horizon files. This is just one small course correction. A reminder that progress doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where the future erases the past. Sometimes the most innovative solution isn't about replacing what came before, but about finding ways to honor it while still moving forward. His assistant studied him for a moment, then smiled. You know, for someone who's built his career on disruption, that's a surprisingly traditional viewpoint. Maybe that's the point, Elon replied. Maybe true innovation isn't just about disruption. Maybe it's also about connection, finding ways to link what was with what will be. The package was sent the next day via overnight courier. And then, somewhat to his surprise, Elon found himself facing something unfamiliar: the need to wait, to step back and let events unfold without his direct intervention. For someone accustomed to commanding vast resources and seeing immediate results, it was an uncomfortable position. His instinct was to call, to check, to ensure that everything was proceeding according to plan. But he had deliberately removed himself from the process, creating layers of separation between himself and the Doyles. All he could do now was wait. During that waiting period, Elon found himself thinking about Frank's garage in unexpected moments. In the middle of a meeting about the latest battery technology, he remembered the methodical way Frank had diagnosed the Tesla's failure. While reviewing plans for a new gigafactory, he recalled the careful organization of tools on the workshop wall. As he tested a prototype vehicle on the track, he found himself wondering what Frank would think of the handling, the mechanical design, the user serviceability. It was as if the brief encounter had inserted itself into his professional consciousness, becoming a kind of alternate perspective that he couldn't quite shake and wasn't sure he wanted to. 3 days after the package was sent, his private line rang with a call from an unknown number with a West Texas area code. Is this Elon Musk? A gruff, familiar voice demanded without preamble. Hello, Frank? Elon replied, unable to keep a small smile from his voice. I take it you received the proposal? Proposal? That what you call it? Frank's tone was difficult to read, somewhere between anger and astonishment. Bank calls me yesterday, saying my mortgage has been paid in full. Then this fancy courier shows up with papers about some strategic partnership. And now my granddaughter's got a full scholarship to finish her degree. You want to explain what the hell is going on? I thought the documents were quite clear, Elon replied calmly. Desert Horizons is interested in developing a network of hybrid service stations in rural areas. Your location and expertise make Doyle's an ideal candidate for the pilot program. Cut the corporate bullshit, Frank growled. This has your fingerprints all over it. Desert Horizons, really? Elon chuckled despite himself. I may have had some input on the name. Some input? Boy, I might be old, but I ain't stupid. This whole thing reeks of you trying to... Frank paused as if searching for the right words. I don't know what you're trying to do exactly, but, know a handout when I see one. It's not a handout, Elon corrected him. It's an investment, one with promising returns, both financial and otherwise. Financial returns? In a gas station 15 miles from nowhere? In a hybrid service facility strategically positioned to support both traditional and electric vehicle owners in a region currently underserved by both, Elon countered. The business case is sound. A long pause followed. When Frank spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. Why are you doing this? Really? It was the same question Jenny had asked, the same one Elon had been asking himself. The answer came more easily now. Because our encounter reminded me of something important, he said honestly. That innovation isn't just about creating the new, it's about respecting what came before. Your knowledge, your approach to problem solving, your dedication to your craft, these things have value, real value, and they deserve to be preserved, not discarded. Another silence stretched between them, this one more contemplative. The proposal says I keep control, Frank finally said. That true? Or is this some corporate takeover where I end up pushed out in a year? It's true, Elon confirmed. Your name stays on the sign. You run the operation your way. The partnership provides capital, equipment, and expanded business opportunities. But the soul of Doyle's remains exactly as it is. And Jenny's scholarship? That legitimate? Completely. She earned it with her academic record. The program is just making accommodations for her situation as a single mother. Frank grunted, a sound that might have contained grudging approval. You went to a lot of trouble to keep your name off this. I didn't want it to feel like charity, Elon explained, or a publicity stunt. This is a business decision with mutual benefits. Bullshit, Frank said. But there was no heat in it. This is you having some kind of midlife crisis after getting stranded in the desert? Elon laughed. Maybe a little, but the business case is still sound. A long sigh came through the line. Jenny's over the moon about the scholarship. Already talking about specializing in renewable energy systems. Kids smarter than both of us put together. I don't doubt it, Elon agreed. And those designs for the station, keeping the old pumps alongside the new charging stations. That your idea? I may have made some suggestions, Elon admitted. There was a long pause. You know, I looked you up after you left. Read about your companies, what do they call it, your vision? And? Elon prompted when Frank fell silent again. And I thought you were full of it, Frank said bluntly. All that talk about saving the planet with electric cars and rockets to Mars seemed like rich man fantasies to me. But then I saw how you worked on that car. How you listened, really listened when I explained what was wrong. Not many billionaires would get their hands dirty like that. I wasn't always a billionaire, Elon replied. And I learned a long time ago that there's no substitute for direct experience. You can't truly understand something until you've built it, fixed it, made it work with your own hands. That's about the first sensible thing I've heard from a tech executive, Frank said. And Elon could almost hear the reluctant smile in his voice. Another long pause. Never thought I'd see the day when an old dinosaur like me would be partnering with someone like you. World's a strange place. Getting stranger every day, Elon agreed. But maybe in this case it's strange in a good way. Maybe, Frank conceded. Then, with obvious difficulty, thank you. Not just for the money part, for seeing value in the old ways. Doesn't happen much these days. The value was always there, Elon replied. Sometimes we just need a reminder to look for it. As he ended the call, Elon felt an unfamiliar sense of satisfaction, different from the rush of a successful product launch or a rocket reaching orbit. This was quieter, more personal. In a world where his every action was scrutinized and his every word analyzed, he had done something purely because it felt right, with no expectation of public recognition or corporate benefit. The next day, Elon authorized the transfer of the first phase of funding to begin the renovations at Doyle's. The project team would work directly with Frank and Jenny, implementing the changes with their input and approval every step of the way. The scholarship program would officially begin with the next academic term, allowing Jenny to resume her studies while still helping her grandfather with the business. That evening, Elon received 2 items via courier. The first was a signed copy of the partnership agreement, Frank's bold signature stark against the corporate letterhead of Desert Horizons LLC. The second was a small package containing a worn but perfectly maintained wrench, the same one Frank had used to help repair the Tesla, with a note in a young, careful hand. Grandpa says every good engineer needs the right tools, and that sometimes the old ones work best. Thank you for believing in us. Jenny and Tyler, future rocket builder. Elon placed the wrench on his desk, a singular anomaly among the sleek, modern design of his office. It would remain there, a tangible reminder of a lesson learned in the Texas desert, that true innovation doesn't just create the future, it finds ways to carry the best of the past forward with it. 2 months later, as his private jet flew over West Texas on the way to a meeting in Mexico City, Elon asked the pilot to make a slight detour. From 5,000 feet up, he could see the transformation taking shape. Solar panels gleaming on the roof of Doyle's Gas and Repair, new charging stations installed alongside the vintage pumps, the parking lot freshly paved but the old sign, still proudly displaying the name that had been there since 1968. It wasn't a global solution, It wouldn't single-handedly solve climate change or revolutionize transportation. It was just one small gas station in the middle of nowhere, a tiny dot in the vast landscape of technological transformation. But as Elon looked down at that dot, he felt an unexpected sense of pride, different from but no less powerful than what he felt watching a Falcon rocket soar into space or seeing thousands of Teslas rolling off the production line. Because sometimes he was beginning to understand the most meaningful changes weren't the ones that made the headlines. Sometimes they were the small, quiet ones that preserved what was valuable from the past while still making room for the future. Later that evening, as his jet took off for another meeting in another city, Elon found himself looking down at the patchwork of lights below, each representing lives and stories as complex and valuable as the Doyles. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine a future where progress didn't leave people behind, where the Frank Doyles of the world weren't rendered obsolete, but were instead recognized for the irreplaceable knowledge they possessed. It was, he had to admit, a future worth working toward. Stranded, when innovation meets tradition. The boardroom on the 32nd floor of the Austin high-rise hummed with the quiet energy of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, but Elon Musk's attention was focused inward, on the faces of his executive team as they discussed production timelines and supply chain optimizations for the upcoming quarter. And, with the new battery fabrication process, we're looking at a 12% increase in energy density with only a 4% rise in production costs, his chief technology officer was saying, gesturing toward a complex graph on the digital display wall. Elon nodded, making appropriate comments and asking relevant questions. But part of his mind remained in the desert, in a small garage where an old man with calloused hands had shown him a different kind of expertise, one born of decades of hands-on experience rather than advanced degrees and algorithms. Elon, your thoughts on the timetable? His COO asked, drawing him back to the present. It's ambitious but achievable, he replied smoothly. Push the engineering team on the thermal management issue. We can't risk another delay. The meeting continued. Decisions were made, directives issued. After 2 hours, the executives filed out, leaving Elon alone with his assistant, who handed him a stack of documents requiring his signature. And your jet is scheduled for 4 p.m., she added. Unless you need to adjust the departure time. Actually, Elon said, making a sudden decision, I'll need about an hour with the legal team before we leave. And get me Jennifer Chen from the Tesla Service Network division. May I tell them what this concerns? His assistant asked, already typing notes into her tablet. Elon hesitated, then simply said, a new pilot program I'm considering, rural service infrastructure. When his assistant had gone, Elon walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling city below. Austin represented the future he was helping to build, tech-forward, rapidly growing, constantly innovating. But his mind kept returning to Doyle's gas and repair, to a family fighting to preserve their legacy in a world that seemed determined to render them obsolete. He pulled out his phone and swiped through the photos he'd discreetly taken, the worn, but meticulously organized tools in Frank's garage, the ancient but lovingly maintained gas pumps, the for sale sign that had stopped him in his tracks. Then he opened his browser and pulled up the county property records he'd looked up the night before. The mortgage statements told a stark story. Doyle's gas and repair was 3 months from foreclosure. The second mortgage taken out for Martha, Doyle's cancer treatments had pushed the family to the financial breaking point. No traditional bank would refinance given the property's location and declining business. Elon closed his browser and made another call. Raj, I need you to set up a Delaware LLC, today if possible. Keep it separate from our usual corporate structure, and I'll need a secure transfer of personal funds, not company money. His CFO's voice came through, puzzled but professional. All right. What's the purpose of the entity? Real estate investment, Elon replied simply. Small scale, private venture. By the time his jet took off that evening, the pieces were already in motion. The LLC, Desert Horizons Investment Partners, existed on paper, with Elon as its sole member, but his name buried in layers of legal anonymity. His personal legal team had drafted the necessary documents. His assistant had compiled research on government grants for rural business development and green energy infrastructure. As the jet climbed through the clouds, Elon reviewed the file his team had compiled on Jenny Doyle. Her academic records were impressive. She'd maintained a 3.8 GPA at UT Austin while working part-time before her unexpected pregnancy and her grandmother's illness had forced her to withdraw. A talented engineer lost to circumstance. He made another call, this time to the dean of engineering at his alma mater, a woman who owed her research funding to his foundation. "Barbara, I need a favor," he began, explaining what he wanted without revealing why. A full scholarship for a promising student who had to pause her education. Remote learning options. Flexible scheduling for a single mother. "We don't typically make such accommodations," the dean hedged. "I understand. That's why my foundation will be endowing a new program specifically for non-traditional students in STEM fields. Jenny Doyle will be its first recipient, but certainly not its last." By the time his jet landed in California, Elon had set in motion a chain of events that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the Doyle family. But as he reviewed the plans one final time before sending them to his implementation team, he found himself making unexpected adjustments. Initially, he'd considered simply buying the gas station outright, paying off the mortgages, and converting it entirely to a Tesla service center. Clean, efficient, forward-looking. But now he deleted that directive, replacing it with something more nuanced. "Preserve the existing structure and aesthetic of Doyle's Gas and Repair," he wrote. "Retain the vintage gas pumps as functional units alongside new EV charging stations. Upgrade the garage equipment while maintaining its current organization and character." He paused, then added, "All changes subject to owner approval. This is to be presented as a partnership, not an acquisition." It wasn't the most efficient approach from a business perspective. It would have been simpler to start fresh, to bulldoze the old and build something sleek and modern in its place. But that would erase everything that made Doyle special: the history embedded in its walls, the knowledge accumulated over decades of hands-on problem-solving. The next morning, as he reviewed the final documents before digitally signing them, Elon realized that this project had become unexpectedly personal. He was one of the richest men on the planet, accustomed to solving problems at global scale through technology and innovation. Yet here he was, devoting considerable resources to saving one small gas station in the Texas desert. Why? The question nagged at him as he authorized the first wire transfer that would quietly pay off the Doyle's mortgages. Perhaps it was because Frank Doyle represented something increasingly rare in the world Elon was helping to create: a direct, tangible connection between human skill and mechanical problem-solving. Perhaps it was because he saw in Jenny a reflection of his younger self: talented, ambitious, but constrained by circumstances beyond her control. Or perhaps it was simply because for a few hours in that desert garage, he'd been reminded of what it felt like to build something with his own hands, to solve a problem directly rather than through layers of organization and delegation. Whatever the reason, as the wheels began turning on what his team had dubbed Project Horizon, Elon insisted on two unusual conditions: absolute confidentiality and meticulous attention to detail. The Desert Horizons LLC would act through intermediaries. His name would appear nowhere. The Doyles would be approached not with charity, but with a business proposition, one structured to preserve their dignity and independence. The paperwork should show a consortium of investors interested in developing rural EV infrastructure, he instructed his legal team. The scholarship for Jenny Doyle should come from a foundation supporting women in STEM, not from me personally. His PR director, accustomed to maximizing publicity for every corporate initiative, was baffled. But this could be great press, Elon. Tech billionaire saves small-town business. People would love that story. That's exactly why we're not telling it, Elon replied firmly. This isn't about publicity. It's about doing the right thing, the right way. For the next 3 days, amid product launches and strategic meetings, Elon found himself repeatedly checking on the progress of Project Horizon. He reviewed architectural renderings for the station upgrades, sent back designs that were too modern or corporate-looking, insisted on materials and finishes that would complement the station's existing character rather than replace it. But these vintage-style pumps cost 3 times as much as standard units. His project manager protested. Then we pay 3 times as much, Elon replied simply. A week after his return to California, the pieces were finally in place. The mortgages had been quietly purchased and forgiven by Desert Horizons LLC. A detailed business proposal had been prepared, offering the Doyles a partnership that would transform their station into a hybrid facility, serving both traditional and electric vehicles, with Frank retaining full operational control. A separate letter from the newly established Doyle Continuation Education Scholarship informed Jenny that she had been selected for a full-ride scholarship, including stipend, to complete her engineering degree through a flexible remote program. Elon reviewed the final documents one last time before they were sent. The business proposal was solid, the terms generous but not patronizing. The scholarship materials were professional and legitimate. He'd actually funded a full program, not just a one-off grant for Jenny. None of it had his name attached. As he approved the final package for delivery, his assistant gave him a curious look. "You've been unusually invested in this project," she observed. "May I ask why?" Elon considered the question carefully. "Have you ever had a moment when you suddenly see your own work from a completely different perspective?" he finally asked. "When something you've taken for granted is suddenly cast in a new light?" His assistant nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't sure where he was going with this. "I've spent my career pushing the boundaries of what's possible," Elon continued. "Electric cars, renewable energy, space exploration, all of it aimed at creating a better future. But sometimes, in that push forward, we don't fully account for who gets left behind." He gestured toward the Project Horizon files. "This is just one small course correction, a reminder that progress doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where the future erases the past. Sometimes the most innovative solution isn't about replacing what came before, but about finding ways to honor it while still moving forward." The package was sent the next day via overnight courier. And then, somewhat to his surprise, Elon found himself facing something unfamiliar: the need to wait, to step back and let events unfold without his direct intervention. For someone accustomed to commanding vast resources and seeing immediate results, it was an uncomfortable position. His instinct was to call, to check, to ensure that everything was proceeding according to plan. But he had deliberately removed himself from the process, creating layers of separation between himself and the Doyles. All he could do now was wait. 3 days later, his private line rang with a call from an unknown number with a West Texas area code. "Is this Elon Musk?" a gruff, familiar voice demanded without preamble. "Hello, Frank," Elon replied, unable to keep a small smile from his voice. "I take it you received the proposal?" "Proposal, that what you call it?" Frank's tone was difficult to read, somewhere between anger and astonishment. "Bank calls me yesterday saying my mortgage has been paid in full. Then this fancy courier shows up with papers about some strategic partnership. And now my granddaughter's got a full scholarship to finish her degree. You want to explain what the hell is going on?" "I thought the documents were quite clear," Elon replied calmly. Desert Horizons is interested in developing a network of hybrid service stations in rural areas. Your location and expertise make Doyle's an ideal candidate for the pilot program. "Cut the corporate bullshit," Frank growled. "This has your fingerprints all over it. Desert Horizons, really?" Elon chuckled despite himself. "I may have had some input on the name." A long pause followed. When Frank spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. "Why are you doing this, really?" It was the same question Jenny had asked, the same one Elon had been asking himself. The answer came more easily now. "Because our encounter reminded me of something important," he said honestly. "That innovation isn't just about creating the new. It's about respecting what came before. Your knowledge, your approach to problem solving, your dedication to your craft, these things have value, real value, and they deserve to be preserved, not discarded." Another silence stretched between them, this one more contemplative. The proposal says I keep control, Frank finally said. That true? Or is this some corporate takeover where I end up pushed out in a year? It's true, Elon confirmed. Your name stays on the sign. You run the operation your way. The partnership provides capital, equipment, and expanded business opportunities, but the soul of Doyle's remains exactly as it is. And Jenny's scholarship? That legitimate? Completely. She earned it with her academic record. The program is just making accommodations for her situation as a single mother. Frank grunted, a sound that might have contained grudging approval. You went to a lot of trouble to keep your name off this. I didn't want it to feel like charity, Elon explained, or a publicity stunt. This is a business decision with mutual benefits. Bullshit, Frank said, but there was no heat in it. This is you having some kind of midlife crisis after getting stranded in the desert. Elon laughed. Maybe a little, but the business case is still sound. A long sigh came through the line. Jenny's over the moon about the scholarship. Already, talking about specializing in renewable energy systems. Kids smarter than both of us put together. I don't doubt it, Elon agreed. And those designs for the station, keeping the old pumps alongside the new charging stations, that your idea? I may have made some suggestions, Elon admitted. Another long pause. Never thought I'd see the day when an old dinosaur like me would be partnering with someone like you. World's a strange place. Getting stranger every day, Elon agreed. But maybe in this case it's strange in a good way. Maybe, Frank conceded. Then with obvious difficulty, thank you. Not just for the money part, for seeing value in the old ways. Doesn't happen much these days. The value was always there, Elon replied. Sometimes we just need a reminder to look for it. As he ended the call, Elon felt an unfamiliar sense of satisfaction, different from the rush of a successful product launch or a rocket reaching orbit. This was quieter, more personal. In a world where his every action was scrutinized and his every word analyzed, he had done something purely because it felt right, with no expectation of public recognition or corporate benefit. The next day, he received 2 items via courier. The first was a signed copy of the partnership agreement, Frank's bold signature stark against the corporate letterhead of Desert Horizons LLC. The second was a small package containing a worn but perfectly maintained wrench, the same one Frank had used to help repair the Tesla, with a note in a young, careful hand. Grandpa says every good engineer needs the right tools, and that sometimes the old ones work best. Thank you for believing in us. Jenny and Tyler, future rocket builder. Elon placed the wrench on his desk, a singular anomaly among the sleek modern design of his office. It would remain there, a tangible reminder of a lesson learned in the Texas desert. That true innovation doesn't just create the future, it finds ways to carry the best of the past forward with it. Later that evening, as his jet took off for another meeting in another city, Elon found himself looking down at the patchwork of lights below, each representing lives and stories as complex and valuable as the Doyles. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine a future where progress didn't leave people behind, where the Frank Doyles of the world weren't rendered obsolete, but were instead recognized for the irreplaceable knowledge they possessed. It was, he had to admit, a future worth working toward. Mr. Musk, I have Frank Doyle on line 1. Elon looked up from the boardroom presentation, several executives turning at the interruption. Excuse me, he said, rising from his chair. I need to take this. In his office, he picked up the phone. This is Elon. You gonna come back here and explain yourself, or do I have to call the damn president? Frank's gruff voice demanded. Is there a problem with the renovations? Elon asked cautiously. Problem? No. That's why you need to get yourself out here. Saturday, we're having a ribbon cutting. 3 days later, Elon drove through the Texas desert toward Doyle's Gas and Repair. The transformation was visible from a distance. Solar arrays gleaming on the roof, new signage advertising both traditional fuels and electric charging, the building restored rather than replaced. A small crowd had gathered near the entrance. Frank stood by the door with Jenny and Tyler, spotting Elon's car as he pulled in. As Elon approached, Frank stepped forward, hand extended. Thought you might not come, he said. You didn't give me much choice. Elon replied with a smile, accepting the handshake. Had to see your face when you saw what we've done with the place, Frank explained, then added quietly, and needed to shake the hand of the man who made it possible. Jenny stepped forward. Mr. Musk, I don't know how to thank you. The scholarship, the business plan, it's changed everything. You don't need to thank me, Elon insisted. The scholarship was awarded on merit, and the partnership benefits both parties. Sure it does, Frank said knowingly. That's why your lawyers structured the deal so we get 90% of the profits. Frank led him through the facility. The vintage gas pumps remained, now joined by charging stations beneath a solar canopy. Inside, the garage had been transformed, new diagnostic equipment integrated with Frank's existing tools, creating a workspace that could handle everything from classic carburetors to EV battery systems. Had to teach myself some new tricks, Frank admitted. Jenny's been helping with the computer systems. I've been applying what I'm learning directly to the shop, she explained. It's like having a real-world laboratory. After the ribbon cutting, as evening approached, Elon prepared to leave. I should be heading back, he said, checking his watch. Frank walked him to his car and placed a hand on his shoulder. You know, he said, his voice gruff but sincere. When you first pulled up in that fancy car, I thought you were just another rich fella who thought he knew everything. Didn't expect you to listen. Didn't expect you to learn. I could say the same about you, Elon replied. Didn't expect an old-school mechanic to embrace EV technology so thoroughly. Frank shrugged. Maybe electric cars ain't so bad, he conceded with a reluctant smirk. But don't expect me to drive one. Give it time, Elon said. You might change your mind. Doubt it, Frank replied. But then again, a lot of things I wouldn't have believed 3 months ago. He extended his hand once more. Thank you. Not just for the money, for seeing something worth saving here. Their handshake was brief but meaningful, a connection between past and future, between traditional craftsmanship and technological innovation. As Elon drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Frank had returned to the garage, already working on an old pickup. Jenny sat at a desk with engineering textbooks open, while Tyler examined the solar panels with curious eyes. The Tesla hummed quietly as he pulled onto the highway. The autopilot was available now, but Elon kept his hands on the wheel, choosing to drive himself. For once, his mind wasn't occupied with production targets or innovation roadmaps. He wasn't thinking about battery efficiency or autonomous algorithms. He was thinking about an old mechanic with calloused hands, a young mother with renewed dreams, and a small boy who wanted to build rockets. And he was thinking about a handshake that, in its simple humanity, somehow meant more than any business deal he'd ever signed. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.